give everybody context to let everyone know who you are and what you're about. Marcus was the founder of the Five Gyres, and he's been involved with that for a very long time, over 10 years. It's built an amazing amount of research and data in regarding to plastics, microplastics, and where and how they accumulate all over the world. And I could go into a lot more of an explanation, but I'm meant to be interviewing you, and you're meant to be giving me information about it. So I'd rather you give a more detailed and more relevant description and accurate description of exactly what you do, how you came about getting involved in it. So how did you discover the Five Gyres that fascinated you? What did you discover? How did you find that out? And then how did that develop into the organization that you should be so proud of now?
Sure, Chris. And it goes back to almost 20 years. 20 years ago, people were beginning to talk about these garbage patches in the oceans. And one man, Captain Charles Moore, he had discovered the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It was making headlines 2 decades ago. And I learned about this around the same time I was planning a voyage down the Mississippi River on a plastic bottle raft. And what I saw on my river trip, 5 months on the river, was an unending trail of trash leaving North America for the ocean. And I learned every major river around the world is leaking trash in the oceans. And this guy, Charles Moore, found where it was going, middle of the ocean. So I joined him, worked for many years with him, really committed to trying to solve this problem. Having spent 5 months on the Mississippi River, I fell in love with the river, and I had a compulsion, dedication to protect it. The same way you feel about having crossed the Atlantic and now in the Pacific, you fall in love with the environment. You protect what you know, you protect what you love. So that commitment really became really strong. And I was committed to this conservation work. My wife and I, Anna Cummins, we met and we realized that there were some people doing work in the North Pacific, like Charles Moore, but there was no one looking at the garbage patches around the world. So we began the Five Gyres Institute, and it took us several
You're in demand. You're in such demand, Marcus. They can't leave you alone. These people just want to know more and more information.
Well, it's interesting. There's been a lot of interest, globally. Everyone now knows about the garbage patches.
Yeah.
But we were the first organization to actually sail around the world, a dozen expeditions. We crossed the North Atlantic, North Pacific, South Atlantic, South Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the Bay of Bengal, Arctic, the Antarctic, trying to understand how much trash is out there. Basic science questions. How much trash, where is it, and what's the impact? And we've now published a dozen research papers, and it's led to some, first of all, a lot of public awareness and some big policy wins. For example, we discovered plastic microbeads in the Great Lakes, little tiny little plastic little spheres that we then realized were coming from facial scrubs, consumer products that contain microplastics to scrub your face. And we were lucky to work with about 50 other organizations. We got some sample federal policy. And back then, this is 2015, we got President Obama to sign the Microbead Free Waters Act and stop that pollution. So it's all about the big picture. It's identifying a problem and using science to drive policy to solve it. And it works. If you do it right and you focus on collaborations, get good science, it works.
Yeah, and I think that's the key is sort of collaborating for success. And I think a lot of organizations, a lot of people don't do that enough out there to be able to help not just minimize the problem, but find solutions to it. And I think, as you've learned, it takes not only a couple of people, it takes a village, it takes a community, it takes an entire world to collectively, take action and come together and collaborate to be able to make change. And all those little actions all add up. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that because they see it as just such an overwhelming problem. But I think the microbead discovery that you guys found and then took further, and the action you took and then collaborated to be able to make that dramatic change, which pulled what's that figure that I saw on the website? 360 million microbeads from the ocean or something like that, which is just extraordinary amount of impact. And I think people don't realize how much work and how much effort it takes. But when you collaborate with like-minded people, you have great impact. And that's the definition of success right there.
Yes, yes. And as you mentioned earlier, you know, if you look at these problems as big, insurmountable problems, and you wonder, what can I do? It's something so great. It makes it hard to take the next step to act. But if you look at it and say, here's a big problem, here's one part that I can address. I have the skills, I know other scientists, I know policymakers, I know I can create partnerships to do this little bit. And I'm going to step up to the plate and take some action. That is an easier pathway. And it might lead to, you know, solving the bigger problem collectively. But taking that step, I meet so many people that say, hey, there's a problem. Somebody should do something. Rather than saying, there's a problem, I'm going to step up to the plate and do this little bit. And those are the people I like to hang out with, and those are the ones I collaborate with, and we get stuff done.
Yeah. And but it also just shows you, like, as you said, you never know where that's going to lead. I mean, when you started that journey and started, you know, going out on these adventures, did you imagine that it would lead to where you are today? But you never would know. You never would have known that if you hadn't have taken that step in action. Now you run an organization that's made massive global impact, and it just shows you what happens when you go out on an adventure and you take action against something that you believe needs to change.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, I didn't think I would get to this point because this point wasn't the initial goal. The initial goal was the small step. I'm going to accomplish this. I'm going to set my sights on this. I'm going to get this done. And we got this done. Our first goal was let's charter some sailboats and make our own equipment and go around the world and skim the ocean surface and publish that one paper and tell the world how much is out there. It was a big task. We got that little bit done. And that led to, okay, we've got this, we got these skill sets. Now we're going to do this. We're going to look in lakes and rivers. We found the microbeads, and Obama signed that bill. And then it led to, now we've been called by the UN to be a UN advisor on the science around a global treaty. So you
That's
don't know
incredible.
which path it's going to take you to, but it's making those steps and stepping into the fire and not stepping back and thinking someone else should do it. It's stepping up to the plate that I think it means everything.
Yeah, and I guess that sort of ties into, I think, what we were discussing on the weekend. The power of the start is just start. You know, don't wait for it to be perfect. Don't wait for everything to be right. Just take that first step and see what happens. You can only get feedback, and with that feedback, then you can make better decisions and take better action and learn and evolve from there. And I think that ties in really nicely, sort of to sort of the next question, which I think, as you mentioned. Yeah, I know that, you know, because you're working with it all the time, that everybody knows about the 5 gyres. But when I coming from South Africa and education and what have you, there are a lot of people out there that actually aren't immersed in it, that don't know what the Pacific garbage patch is, or the 5 gyres in regarding to where they're situated and how that links in with currents and wind. So if you've got a very sort of simple description of that, just to give someone an overview, can you give a quick summary of what they are and where they're situated?
Sure. So the 5 gyres are simply rotating currents, and it's caused by wind. Wind makes the ocean surface sort of move. The bigger concept is a Coriolis effect. As the Earth spins, it pulls the atmosphere, and that pulls the wind, and that drives the ocean currents. But the ocean currents themselves, the entire Pacific Ocean in the north is spinning in a clockwise rotation. If I threw a plastic bottle off the coast of California, it would get to Japan in about 5 years and come back in 3 or 4 years across the north. Same in the North Atlantic. It's a clockwise spinning rotation. In fact, that's the route you took from Morocco to the Caribbean. You were riding those gyre currents, the trade winds that take you across near the equator. And in the south, it's different. It's counterclockwise. The Indian Ocean has its own giant spinning vortex. South Atlantic, the same thing. In the South Pacific, the same thing. And those are the 5 subtropical gyres. Now, there are other smaller gyres. In the Southern Ocean is spinning. In the Arctic, there are smaller gyres. These are wind-driven currents. And what happens as trash leaves our coastlines, and I've seen every river, every populated coastline is losing some trash to the ocean. It goes from the coasts into those gyres and then begins to spin and rotate. When it gets to the center, where the winds and waves kind of slow down, it's kind of where it accumulates and begins to fragment the smaller particles, becomes the size of fish food. And that's where we see the impact. It starts harming other marine life.
Okay, and I think that's a really great summary. And when a lot of people, I know that a lot of people talk about, the five gyres, and they talk about, plastic pollution that covers the space the size of Texas, like a plastic island. Is that just a context and a visual that people give to be able to give people context to it so they can imagine it better? Because it's not like you can go like sail out there to these gyres and then get on this plastic island and walk around, correct? So we just want to give people the right information so they understand it better.
That's a good question you ask. That's been a myth we've been battling for more than a decade. There is no island of trash the size of Texas in the middle of the ocean. It's more like a plastic smog, like all these microplastic particles. I think when we spoke, I showed you some of those microplastics.
Yes.
So imagine the ocean. Our publication, we were focused on microplastics, 5.25 trillion particles, about the size of a grain of rice or smaller, just around the entire planet. So that's what the abundance of microplastics looks like worldwide. You do find big things. You find a fishing buoy, a crate. I found a portalette once. I have found all kinds of weird big things, but they're very rare. You'll find big giant balls of fishing nets, but they're rare. It's mostly a small fragments, but they're everywhere. Actually, when the ocean kind of slows down, the waves kind of stop, and the ocean gets to smooth out, you see this kaleidoscope of multicolored plastic fragments as far as you can see, but they're kind of spread out, like speckled across the ocean surface. And that actually is more dangerous than if it were a heaping pile of consolidated trash. If it were a heaping pile, you just go get it.
Yeah.
But this small microplastics, I have found them frozen in icebergs inside thousands of fish, buried in sediment on coastlines, on the seafloor. It's a much more elusive, almost impossible to clean up, economically unfeasible to clean up. So all the solutions we know comes from rivers to the ocean. It's going up rivers to the source where we're going to stop it. When it's still big, you know which country it comes from, you know what the products are. That's where we're going to solve the problem. Ocean cleanup is just not going to work. No one has proven yet a smart way to do it. What's the smartest way, as we said, is upstream, changing our systems that package and move goods. Find a better way rather than all this trash we're making.
Yeah, I think that sort of is a great segue into the sort of the next question is we talk about, well, how do we go out and eradicate it? And people think that it's all this plastic pollution, these big these big pieces of everything that they can just go out and collect. But most of it is microplastics that either you can't see or it's so small that how do you troll for that and how do you collect it when it's just, as you said, it can go hundreds of meters of depth in regarding to the levels and layers depending on how strong the wind is and what's happening with the ocean currents. And a lot of the time you can't even see it. So how do you collect it? And as you said, the solution isn't where it all collects. It's actually at the start, at the base, and that's where the solutions need to come from. So when people talk about like a big ocean cleanup out in the middle of the ocean, is that kind of thing really going to make a massive impact, or is it really going to the source of where manufacture takes place and the protocols and the policy in regarding to the development of new plastic? Because as you know, and as I think it even says on the website, 91% of plastic isn't recycled. So change the source and how it gets into the world and the marketplace.
Exactly. Everything you just said is our talking points for how do we solve the problem. Ocean cleanup is just not going to work. If there were any way to make it work, or at least remove some of the big items out there, would be to incentivize people who are already there, the fishermen, the tourists, the shipping vessels. If you see a big giant tangle net, just bring it, and maybe €1 per kilo, some incentive there. But to stop the flood of microplastics, and that's where the biggest harm is, it's got to start when the products are still whole. And you can also point to a country. I've had a chance to interact with so many CEOs of companies and show them a jar of microplastics. And the first question is, that's not mine. How do you know it's mine? And what do you want me to do? And that's where the answer to that question is, what do you want them to do? Is let's find a better way to bring goods to consumers without throwaway packaging. It's this throwaway culture that's creating microplastics around the world. I've gone to so many cities, whether it's in Europe, the US, or parts of Africa and Asia, South America, where there's a flood of single-use throwaway plastic products that are used to package. I mean, it's a material plastic designed to last forever. Yet you're packaging some chips or cookies that are eaten in a few minutes and then thrown away. And it's that insanity that creates this legacy of microplastics around the world. So finding smarter ways to package goods, the whole what we call the reuse economy. I have met so many companies, innovative companies, finding better materials or better ways to move goods. There are biopolymers that are readily biodegradable. There are ways to use paper and other renewable materials that aren't harmful to package goods. There are ways to bring goods to customers with reusable systems. Like one company, Repack, has a reusable mailer that can replace the ones you get, to your home delivery and throw away. These are reusable. Reusable mugs in stores. The reuse economy is really growing, and the biopolymers, those can work. But it's going to take policy, really smart policy. And I meet CEOs that say, we don't mind policy as long as we're all playing by the same rules. So if you eliminate plastic bags, you can't have it be a voluntary thing where one store says no more plastic bags, while everyone else has the advantage of using them. So policy works. And I'm proud to say that 2 months ago, the United Nations actually agreed, 175 countries agreed to pass a resolution to create a global treaty on plastic pollution within 2 years from now. It's so inspiring. We're now at that level. But the devil's in the details. It can't be all about recycling. We can't recycle our way out of this problem. A lot of these products are not recyclable anyway. So we're seeing big shifts. And again, back to our earlier conversation, it's happening from thousands, if not millions of individuals collectively taking action in the same direction. That's what's working at these high-level policy initiatives and lots of innovators in this space.
Yeah, as you said, giant collaboration for the same purpose has big impact, and that's a perfect example of that. That policy that you're talking about, Marcus, that's obviously an enormous shift. And with that kind of backing behind it, would that just be a policy ban against plastic bags, or would that just be policy in regarding to plastic packaging in general?
So the United Nations bill is going to have a few parts to it. One is to really acknowledge that recycling hasn't worked. As you mentioned, only 9% of plastics in the US get recycled.
Which is horrendous. Isn't that a horrendous figure? I mean, it's terrifying when you think of like all the plastic that's being produced, and 95% of it is still out there in the world, broken down into microplastics, and every single day millions of tons go into rivers and oceans, and only 9% of that is getting recycled. I mean, that's terrifying when you think about it.
If your kid came home and said, I got 9% on the test, you'd be like, what? That's horrible. So yeah, it's a dismal failure. And it's interesting, the California Attorney General is now investigating plastic producers for their mixed messaging campaigns, deceiving the public over the last 40 years. It's interesting. It's almost like the whole smoking industry back in the 20, 30 years ago. There was some deception going on. Thing about recycling. There's a myth of recycling we have to get over. So the part of the UN bill is, it's not about recycling. It's about, first of all, eliminating some of the most problematic products from society. Those are the single-use throwaway products, the chip bags, the straws, the cups,
the plastic bottles.
Yeah, things that are just, they're the biggest polluters, and there are simple systems out there. And I meet so many innovators, young entrepreneurs that have just fantastic ideas. But one challenge is the status quo has had 40, 50 years become very efficient. and they're very rich and they can pay lobbyists and lawyers to defend their systems. But the innovators are stepping up to the plate, and with good policy, so the UN can eliminate the single-use stuff, not focus on recycling, urge countries to take responsibility for what they are losing to the ocean, to monitor what's in their rivers and lakes and coastlines. So there's some teeth in the spill. If you do not trash the oceans, you've got to change your systems, or there'll be some consequences, maybe a fee or something else. So we're looking forward to a really good international bill that all countries adhere to the same rules, and so to end the scourge of plastics on our oceans and in all environments.
Yeah, and as you said, they've got to be consequences. Otherwise, people don't take action. They don't make change. As much as people talk about it, we know that, all the plastic bottles that come from multiple different drink companies, and we're not going to mention anyone in particular, but that's all fueled by oil and gas, because it takes oil and gas to be able to make the plastics as well. So, there are other solutions out there. We know there are, but it's also about cost efficiency and how it's going to affect their bottom line. And because they've been using it for so long, it's become so cost effective and efficient to be able to do that. But that's not an excuse where there are now so many other different, better choices. And I think that leads into exactly what we are talking about, which is, how do we each and every day in some small way make better decisions and be better educated, so we have the awareness, so we are informed. And when we're informed and educated, then we are forced to be able to make better decisions, because we have the awareness that it's the right thing to do. And how can each and every person make better decisions each and every day from a daily buying choices and habits perspective, from your side, Marcus? Because it really does start there, because every day we wake up and we make hundreds of decisions that affect the impact that we make on the environment. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that, and they forget that that's a choice, that we have hundreds of choices each day on, and that can minimize our negative impact and hopefully make a positive impact collectively.
Sure. So I think that there are two answers. The one that we all know is that everyone knows to bring their own bottle, their own bag, and their own personal choices, but it's part of a zero waste lifestyle. How can you be a conscious consumer, and not have so much waste leaving your home? I know here in the United States, people were surprised that, they were told, just consume, put in the recycle bin, we'll take care of it. What they didn't realize was most what's going to recycle bin was not going to recycle. It was being sent to China, until China 3 years ago said, no more, we don't want America's trash. So right now, US recyclers are scrambling to figure out what to do with it, and most goes to landfill. Becoming a more educated, conscious consumer. So that's one thing, is zero waste your lifestyle, minimize your waste. And you can do so and feel good about the legacy you're leaving behind the next generation for your kids. And the other thing is, perhaps even more important, is to get organized. Join any local group, local campaigns to do good in your community. Whether it's plastics or something else, but to get organized. Just remember that you belong to a community. You are not an individual who stands alone from everyone else. So I find when people get organized, first of all, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of joy to work on a singular mission with other people. But then when you have these wins, you can celebrate. And it brings such a tremendous purpose to life, and the power of collaboration. I've given so many school talks to kids, and I tell them stories about when I see kids at city council. When I see a little kid, like 10, 12 years old, stand up and tell the entire council and the mayor of a town that they don't want plastic bags anymore. Why can't they ban plastic bags? When the kid says, I'm tired of picking up bags in front of my school, off my beach, off the roadside, what are you going to do about it? I've never seen a kid get interrupted by a mayor or shouted down or told to go away. They listen. And the kids, I've seen so many kids have their voices heard, and that voice turn into the change they want to see in the world. And they're doing it, that they're getting involved, they're doing it together. I've seen many families, I've seen local organizations grow and just take on these challenges. So it's zero waste your lifestyle, get organized and make stuff happen.
Yeah, and I think great example of that. Like I'm super inspired by seeing kids and the impact that they can make, and I think Greta Thunberg is a great example of that. Like little people with big ideas can make enormous impact, and I think that's so inspiring to the youth. And I think it's really inspiring to see that the youth really pushing that movement to be able to make change, because they are the future leaders of our world. And thank goodness for that, because the policies aren't getting changed and made quick enough in order to be able to make the dramatic change that's needed in order to turn the tide on the plastic pollution crisis we have. So yeah, huge props to that. And I think a big one, which is a nice one to segue into for also for five jars, and what you do is that, you know, having the awareness, and that stems down to education. And I know that you guys have quite a big education arm on your side as well. You do the trash Blitz, and you have some educational platforms on your website in regarding to lessons and what have you that are, I think, are free as far as I know, for people to get involved and to learn more about it, and to become educated, inspired, and go out and join and become part of it and make impact. Is that correct? You want to tell us a little bit more about that, Marcus? I think you guys are doing some great work.
We have tons of education programs, like curriculum. So any teacher can go to our site and use it as a resource. There's tons of information out there. Any citizen can go to our website and learn about the issue. We have lots of educational videos. We have one amazing young man who joined us. He's our spokesperson. He's got to be in his early 20s, very photogenic, and he just talks about the issue in all these campaigns, both in English and Spanish. We do something called Trash Blitz. It's a way to let you and your community take our app and our data card and survey your community to get good data. So when a kid takes that data to a city council and says, we found 1,053 plastic bags on the beach today, what are you gonna do about it? So we provide all these tools, educational resources for free, so the individual and small groups can get organized in your community and make change happen. And we also have some really good campaigns in Los Angeles, for example, Reusable LA. We just had one big win where now all restaurants, it's a simple win, but it's one big step. A restaurant or any kind of venue can't just give you all the single-use plastics automatically, straws and cutlery and all this stuff. They have to ask you. Actually, it's by request. So only if the consumer requests a straw or a fork are they able to give it. It's a big step. It's going to save, keep millions of objects out of the trash can, out of the environment. One small step.
That's a huge win. That's a huge win. And I think you also do some other programs that are also with the rivers as well. And it seems like that a lot of the educational tools and platforms are both in English and Spanish, which is amazing. So very, very a lot of variety and a lot of assets that people can use. And I think, as you said, it's all about giving people tools so they can take action and point them in the right direction, so that actually people don't have excuses of that they can't do anything. What can I do? There are so many different avenues where people can get involved, can join a organization, give their time towards making it happen. And I think sort of that's probably the biggest thing that I can think of. But I think, have you got any, so if you had like 3 tips of what someone could do as an individual and what people could do as a business to be able to make a positive impact and minimize your negative impact, what would they be? 3 simple tools.
Sure. As an individual, I think go to our website and look at the tools. Trash Blitz is one. So how do you survey trash in your community to really get some baseline data on the problem locally? And then number 2, find your collaborators. Who in your community cares about this as well? And how can you organize and then have some action, collective action? And then 3, I would say just demonstrate the solutions you want yourself. Walk around with your own bag and mug, and then urge the businesses you go to to embrace those. Some coffee shops will give you a small discount on your coffee if you bring your own mug, and urge those restaurants to do so. And if a restaurant or a coffee shop is not doing that or not providing mugs, ask them why. So stepping up to the plate. So those are a few things. And then for businesses, same for a business. if you are not embracing the reusable culture, then you need to do so right away. If you're giving out throwaway utensils, you are exacerbating the problem we're trying to solve. So I urge businesses, find what are the business models, and they exist, to embrace the reuse economy. That's one. Another is not to fight the policy. Think of the bigger picture, not just your own bottom line, but your community's bottom line, the bottom line for the future, the world we want to have. We don't want a world of waste. So the more businesses can think in those bigger pictures, and often it means taking a big step. Say, okay, I may spend a little more on these reusable mugs and cups, but it's the right thing to do. So it's really embracing your own business values, why you're in business in the first place. It's to serve the community, not just improve your bank account, but to do good in the world.
Yeah,
So
I wish more people thought like that, Marcus. I think you're 100% right. You know, people aren't thinking enough about community, and they are thinking too much about bottom line. But we are one world community, and I think a lot of times people forget that. And we need to be the change that we want to see in the world, not only today but for our future. And we need to be the role models for that future to change, and be a role models for others around us. And that stems from you individually and as a business as well, role models to other businesses too. So yeah, spot on. Thank you. That's really informative and very impactful. I think that the last sort of 3 questions are really just down to data and science. And you know, I think as you've said, you're a great example, and the 5 jars are a great example of data and science that drives policy and which impacts by making dramatic change. So what do you see as being like the most important data and science collected around microplastics and plastics in our oceans that's really important, that's come up in the last 3 years, and why is it important?
You know, I think what's most important, and it's really coming back to our inland communities, is you know, I've done so much ocean sampling, over 100,000 miles of sailing, collecting the ocean surface, and it's the tragedy of the commons. When I bring a jar of microplastics in the middle of the ocean to a CEO, and they say, which country, which company did it come from? Going upstream, getting data on upstream abundance and distribution of trash. So going to a community, your own community, and how many bottles, how many bags, how many straws, how many bottle caps, how many bottles are littering your roadsides, your forests, your fields, your neighborhoods, your beaches. I think that kind of data is so powerful, so useful for policy. And that relates directly to what's in the oceans. Now, in terms of middle of the ocean, there is still some science to do, understanding impacts. I've seen some recent papers looking at the distribution of plastics vertically from the surface down to the sea floor. We need to understand that the final resting place for plastic isn't the surface, it's the floor, it's the sea floor. So you're seeing a tremendous abundance of trash littering the sea floor. And also we're finding the Arctic, these very remote waters is where, you know, surface currents often drift to, and they sort of slow down and stop. So a lot of microplastics in the Arctic. I got one photograph I took of a candy bar wrapper frozen in the iceberg. So it's those kinds of images, those kinds of experiences. So still, I believe collecting data and creating education communication campaigns around ocean plastics keeps the public engaged in the relationship between their decisions and the impact on the world, somewhere far away, far in the future from their actions today. But the data, the more you get closer to land, the more in your community, you get that data. You get a kid to go to city council and tell the mayor, here's the number of bottles, bags, and straws, and cups, and bottle caps on my street, my beach, our community. What are you gonna do about it? That data is powerful.
Agreed, 100%. Have you seen any sort of key solutions that have come up in the last couple of years besides what you're talking about with the UN new policy on plastics that's really powerful, impactful, and can possibly bring about massive global change in a positive way?
Yes, so the whole reuse economy is really taking off, and that's like within cities. For example, one company, they have a reusable stainless steel mug and cup, and they're able to get like hundreds of restaurants to use the same mug and cup. You bring your dirty mug to a restaurant, they'll give you a new one, a clean one with a new beverage. You go then you drink that on your way home. You bring that new dirty mug to the next restaurant, and they clean and give you a new one. So keeping those materials in circulation is a zero waste philosophy. But I'm also seeing a lot of biomaterials. There's one great company called Ecobative. They are making packaging. You've seen all the styrofoam blocks to hold your
Yep.
TV in a box. So this company, they use mushrooms. They take mycelium infused and sawdust, make the same kind of packaging. And they've got some huge contracts now. I saw they're packaging bottles of wine in these mushroom blocks. And you take these blocks, and when you're done, they're beautiful mulch for your garden. I mean, what a great innovation. So that way there's no styrofoam waste. There's actually something nutritive for your garden in the box along with your wine or your electronics. And there are so many companies like that. They're using different natural materials in innovative ways. There are a few companies I've worked with. One has a thin film called PHA. It looks and feels like plastic. And we're doing a study right now. I have found that PHA film within a couple weeks in a very moist, warm environment like a swamp, it goes away. It's made from the same nutritive matter inside the cell walls of microbes. You can extract it, make a plastic, and then you can go back to these microbes. It's a very innovative new material. So we're seeing innovation in science and technology around materials and innovative business models around moving goods to consumers without waste.
Yeah, I think it's exciting. I think those are great examples, and I think there are a lot of examples out there now where companies are starting to use like when I say biodegradable coffee cups and holders, and the rings around the beer 6-packs that are made of either mushrooms or completely biodegradable items. I know I work with a company called Finisterre that does a lot of clothing that also uses biodegradable whole distribution chain. Even their packaging dissolves in water down to nothing and is completely ink free from any toxic chemicals as well. So there are companies that are doing it out there, as you said, and we notice because we look at those kind of things each and every day. But at the moment it's just not enough. But the movement has started, and there's definitely a movement, a collective global movement in the right direction. And I think that's exciting and it's inspiring. It's just wanting to bring about that change quicker and more effective and efficiently that's happening at the moment. If you one last final question, Marcus, thanks very much for your time today. If you had all the money in the world, what would your solution be to be able to solve the challenge from the source? If you had I won't say a magic wand, but if you had a magic wand of a pot of money that was endless, where would you start with that, with solving that, the challenge that we're facing globally? Because there are solutions, and we're all about solution-driven thinking. So tell us your magic solution that you would start with if you had all the money in the world to be able to make this challenge disappear.
Because the change, I see so many change makers in the world. And the barriers are up against the big companies, the big polluters. I would take all the CEOs of all the big plastic producers, manufacturers, I'd get them in the ocean, or I'd get them to a community inundated with plastic waste, and I'd say, meet the people who are impacted by what you do. Go in the ocean and see the impact. See it for yourself, experience it, fall in love with the ocean, know the suffering of the people, and then go back to your board as your company and make some decisions.
I love that.
What I would.
I love that. Go out and have an adventure. Get out in nature so you can see the impact of what's actually really happening, and then fall in love with nature. And once you're in it, it's hard not to. And then you want to protect it and respect it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Marcus, I'm not going to take any more of your time. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. I know you've undertaken some incredible adventures yourself. You've got an amazing book out called what is it? The Junk Raft, which I've just started reading, and it's super inspiring. It's super impactful, and that's about putting together all the plastic bottles into a raft and then sailing across the Pacific. And that's an incredible journey. I know it's got very, very high rating, I think on Amazon, like 4.8 or something out of 5, which is really, really inspiring. And I know you continuously doing really great work out there. How do people find you, and what are all your links to your socials, your website, and everything else, so people can come and join, be a part of it, donate, and support you in the amazing work that you and the 5 Gyres are doing?
Our website and all of our socials are all 5 Gyres, the number 5, GYRES. And you can find us, and you can find me as well as on our website. And I'm more than happy to talk with anyone, anytime, on how to solve this problem.
Fantastic. And go out and get that that book of his, Junk Raft. It's an amazing read. I'm looking forward to learning more about it. And thank you, Marcus, for your time. And keep up the incredible work you're doing, inspiring, making change, being the role model of change that we want to see in the world, not only today, but for the future. Solution-driven thinking guru you are.
Thank you, Chris. Same to you. Fair winds and following seas on your journey. It's really been a pleasure getting to know you, and best of luck in everything you do.